はい、皆様、こんばんは。レオキレイです。ザ・ファースト3っていうね、ゲームをやっていこうと思います。まあ、見てわかる通り、やったことがないんでね。うん。マウス感度とかあるけど、パッとやったからあんま関係ないんだよね。字幕あった方がいいのかな。解説モード。ちょっとこれ一回なしでやってみて。これね、今気づいたんだけどね、決定キーバズなんだよ。つまりね、Apex と一緒。まあ、2時間ぐらいで終わるらしい物語らしいんですけど、音大きいかなこれ。大丈夫かな。正直ね、私もこれは噂でしか聞いたことがないから。
I thought I heard you get up.
Yeah, I'm awake. Sorry, I just can't sleep.
Are you thinking about him?
Yeah, a bit. Usually get back to sleep, my love.
全
I'm
部そういうとこ
fine.
ろがわかんないのと、あとやっぱ字幕ないとわからんな。
No, it's okay. What else is on your mind?
いきなりどこに行けばいいんだこ
It
れ。
seems weird, but I had one of the most vivid dreams of my life. I saw a fox on a snowy mountain, just looking confused and worried. Those eyes. I can't get those eyes out of my head.
二段ジ
She
ャンプ
was
ができ
running
る。
in
な
the
るほ
windy
ど。
snow, looking for something.
Do you think it has to do with
だったら
you
走ればいい
and
の。
what's been going on?
I don't know. It was just a dream, Rachel. They're not meant to make sense. A lot's happened the past couple days, that's all.
Well,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you're
yeah.
not going to sleep anyway, you should tell me. I want to hear.
All right.
なんか見つけた。あれはなんだ。
壺かな。
壺ではないんだよね。ザ・ファースト3って言って。
So it's usually at this point where people say something like, "This is not the
うんばば
kind
ん
of
ばん
game
ほら
I
ほ
was
らほら挨
expecting."
は
拶。
い、アドミタ
And
さ
that
ん、セイ
happened
ル
a
さん
lot
いら
at
っしゃ
PAX
い。見
West
せ
when
て
I
くだ
showed it.
さ
When
い。
you have little kids play it, but then they see a dead fox cub, or a kit is technically the word, but cub sounds, I don't know, it sounds better. Like Wes Anderson uses it in Fantastic Mr. Fox, so I thought cub would be all right. But anyway, having this game, I wanted it to be more serious. This
なんて
game is based on dealing with the death of my father, which was the hardest thing that's ever happened to me and my family.
ゲーム中に英語の語りが入るイコール壺というラバー判
I
断。
didn't want to talk about it with anybody
あー、なるほ
really.
ど
To
ね。
this day, still, it's very
壺おじってそういう
personal.
の
And
なん
that's why I
だ。
made this game. That's exactly the reason. Because I wanted to get those feelings out and like communicate with people
なんて
without like talking about it. And so that's what the first tree is. It's me dealing with my feelings, and it was a personal project, and it was just me, and it actually, like, I'm really glad I made it, but it wasn't easy to make, I guess is what I'm saying.
まあ、何言ってるかわかんないけど、とりあえずね、このゲームはどういったものかっていう説明をしてるらしい。んこれはん
So, not far from her home, she followed that path to something unexpected.
これは小狐ってことだよな。うん。それでまあ、先に進むか。あ、押すことで走るかどうかを決めるのか。
She had to find her other two children.
あ
So
あ、
she
やっぱ進んでよ
took
かった
that
ね。
path. She followed it towards something ancient. Something with answers.
つまりこれはあれかな、この語り部の人はなんかオープニングみたいなのが始まったけどこの狐の観察をしてる人なのかな。それで
The fox looked high and low, searching for any sign of her cubs.
なんか見つけたよ。
Points of light showed the way to this ancient
あ、
tree.
取れた。
It was as if each one had a story to tell, all their own.
で、多分あそこの光の柱まで迎えってことだよな。
I felt like I was right behind her the whole time.
やっぱり竹。逃げない。で、これは
The bunnies were
Bunnies.
added because my wife, Elise, who also voices Rachel in the game, who's also helped a ton to make the game, as we were playing, she just said it, the world felt kind of empty and not alive enough. So I knew we needed to add some kind of life, and so the bunnies was like the first idea that came to mind. And like most of the game, I used publicly available assets to speed up production because I was working full-time along with making this game, and we just had our first baby, a little girl named Evelyn. So I was messing with this asset called Herdsin, and at one point, like the generation script that creates variations of the sizes of the bunny. One time I got out of control and made like this monster bunny that towered over everybody. And I shared that GIF on Imager and Reddit, and that was a huge hit. It helped definitely gain an audience for this game. But it's hard because this game is like so serious about life and death, not giant bunnies.
たとえ日本語でも何言ってるかわからなそう。うさぎを追うのに忙しくて。
So if you're able to catch all the bunnies on this map, I think there's around 13, then you'll get a special surprise. So good luck.
どっちだろう。あっちにもなんかあるな。あっちにもあるし、あっちにもあるし。いや、あれはさっきの、あれか。バニーズだから。とりあえず、あそこの端っこから行ってみよう。一応ね、このゲーム自体は、まあ、とある方におすすめはしているのでね、まあ、もしかしたらやってくれんじゃねえかなって思いながら、おすすめするんだったら自分もちゃんとやろうって思ってね、ダウンロードしたわけですよ。そしたらさ、
見に来たよ、これ、なーに？
ほんとね、ザ・ファースト3って言って、まだよくわかってない。
Yeah, I think I only did it once. When I was in the 4th grade.
ファーストアイテム。
You know how my life was around then.
多分だけど、
I wanted to show my class what helped pass the time and distract
この裏で語ってる人たちが、その狐を観察してる人なんじゃないかなと思ってて。で、小狐が一匹、もう雪のところで亡くなっちゃってて、なんか。だからもう2匹を探すっていう感じにはなってる。英語でしか喋ってくんねえから何言ってるか全然わかんねえ。アメリカンジョーク入ってる。
Kids can be so cruel.
Some of them are. I shouldn't have let them get to me, but it did. It's amazing we bounced back at all.
じゃなかった。遊具だった。こんなとこに遊具がある。ってことは、ここは前は。てかさっきも遊具だったよね、あそこになったの。ここは普段は街なのか？それとも子供の遊び場？
なるほど、音小さくして見てるから何言ってるかわからなかった。わら。
大丈夫、こっちもわからん。じゃなくて、ハルルいらっしゃい。送ってくださいね。使いの 柱はあそこにある。なんか光ってんな。光の玉っていうのも集めりゃなんかあんのかな。とりあえず多分この光ってるところとかを目指せばいいとは思うんだよね。多分。そしたら何かが起きるのかなって思ってるんだけど。
Do you remember what my dad did for a living?
Wasn't he like a lumberjack?
That's one way of putting it. If wood was a canvas, then a carving knife was his paintbrush. Even after working a 50-hour week, even after his hands were more splinters than skin, he would bring home the nicest piece of Alaskan weeping cedar and make me toys. That wooden train was the first toy I could remember, and I loved it. I just knew from a young age I was going to be a lumberjack, like my father.
酔ってるから字幕もよく見えてなくて、本当にどういうゲームなのかわからないまま見てる。
本当に申し訳ないんだけど、私もわからない。がっつり初見なので、なんとなくスローライブっていうかなんか、ゆったり系なんだろうなーって思ったぐらいなんだよね。ファースト3って、3が木でそのまま意味合ってると思うから、始まりの木なのか始めの木なのかわかんないけど、そういうやつなんだよな。なんか空中にあるな。あれは2段ジャンプで取れたことだよ。こんなもん一発で取れると思うか？取れねえな。ってことはここ乗って、ジャンプ。待って待って。位置関係ぶつ。よし、完璧だな。あっちにもあるんだよな。あっちにもあるんだけど、光ってるのはこっちなんだよな。どっちが正しいんだ？多分光の柱を辿っていくのが正しいルートなんだよな、多分。でもこの光の玉も気になるところなんだよね。なんかこのまま先にも進めそうだな。やべ、安定した。時間かけすぎた？雪が溶けた。え、どうなってる？え、戻れないのかな？戻れないな、多分これ。時間かけすぎか？あ、ダメだ、ないな。次がない。時間かけすぎたのかな？じゃあなんか内蔵時間とかあるのかな？てか雪が溶けるまで行っちゃダメやろ。残りの小狐どこよ？実はかなり効率よく進めなきゃいけない。で、またなんかある。
My teenage years were full of sketching, angst, and trouble.
スケッチ。
I wasn't popular or unpopular. Maybe just forgettable. I guess that gave me a sense of freedom. So I hung out with crazy kids, doing crazy things, even though I mostly just watched the chaos ensue. We did it all. Put fireworks in mailboxes, hide roadkill in people's garages, break windows of the barber shop and Anchorage. My dad was furious, but he was so busy working he couldn't do much to stop me from going out.
I think being an adult means there's no one to stop you making hard decisions. He had to make a living, and he couldn't be in two places at once.
Yeah, I realize that now. But at the time, I was sure he was more interested in growing his business than what was going on with me.
会話が終わったな。で、これはボックスフルーツ
This is the level that I showed at PAX West, which was a crazy dream come true that this hobby project was being shown next to all these amazing indie games. So I decided to show this level because it's smaller, there's like some jumping puzzles, and I thought it was a good entry into the game. But the one thing I can't seem to forget is right before we opened to the public, there's an indie dev superstar. Like, you've definitely heard of his games. And I was like terrified. He wanted to try it out. So I said, of course, like, please give me your feedback. And he was super nice, super talented, of course. But this embarrassing bug happened, which I'd never seen before in my life, where when he dug the item up, he jumped right after, and it created the dust cloud to permanently be on the rest of the level. It wouldn't turn off. So it looked like this fart cloud following the fox as it just kept running with this beautiful music and serious voiceover. And it was just, it was horrible. I think about that every time I look at this level. But, you know, I was able to fix it, so I'm glad someone could at least find that bug. I always wanted this game to be very meditative and relaxing, but I know there's a balance between keeping the player's interest. So I added this butterfly jumping mechanic just to like spice things up. I used a plugin called Playmaker for Unity, which in a visual editor lets you do interactive things, which is perfect for me because I do come from a film and design background. But on the flip side, I really wish I was good at code, because this jumping mechanic, the jumping mechanic in the whole game actually has frustrated a lot of players. But hopefully I've been able to fine-tune it, so it should feel a lot better now. I would just hate that this meditative game would get frustrating, so I've definitely I've lowered the gravity, I've made the jumps more consistent, so hopefully people can just focus on the world and the story.
あ、なんかこの先行っちゃいけない気がする。なんだろう。若干ダメな気がする。戻る。でもあそこにまだ光の柱あったから大丈夫か。
ジャガーだっけ。
ジャガーなの？本当にジャガーでいいの？お？なんかいる。こいつかさっきのなんかよくわかんない蝶のマークって。おう。よー。大ジャンプかましたぞ。おや、黒板だ。今話してる二人って、いや違うな。ダオビでも男性だもんな、二人とも。お酒の瓶だね。缶もあったけど。パトカーだ。パトカーがあって、本当これなんだろう。本当何するかわからんな。学校かなこれは。でも学校で。
He was working another late night, and my friends were over, saying how bored they were, and how they had come all the way out to my house for nothing. One of them mentioned how that old, ugly beyond belief truck was still in the garage, and how we should take it for a spin. I was only 15, so I kind of fought it for a while. The next thing I knew, we were careening around the mountain path, rocks spitting onto the sides of the cliff, while my dad's cringeworthy bluegrass blared out the speakers. I drove while my friends were in the back of that yellow and purple truck, throwing beer bottles and trash at anything remotely interesting. Felt like I was soaring in the air with borrowed wings. But all good things have endings. A cop outside of Eagle River pulled us over after he saw us in a bottle rocket into someone's yard. What followed was a long night of talking to disappointed adults and feeling smaller than ever.
ていうか、なんでさっきからこのいうことは字幕あるのによくわかんないメッセージボックスみたいなの字幕ないのよ。予算の関係かしら。で、光の柱が2つあるね。ここから引き返せないな。レッツゴー。死ぬって。普通は死ぬって。君なんで生きてるの？猫でもなかなか厳しいよ今の。どうせこうでしょ？あれー、届かなかった。もう一回。位置は合っているはずだからね。行き過ぎるかと思った。そしてこの上に登りたいわけだから、もう一度。
猫はどんな高いところから落ちても大丈夫だから。
マジでこれキツネなんだけど大丈夫？これ一応キツネだよ。にゃーって泣かないと思うんだけど。
After he drove me home from the police station, I blew up at him, saying how I never wanted to be like him, how I was gonna be someone and leave that hick icebox for good. He just looked forward at the road with tired eyes. I took out that bluegrass tape from the cassette deck and chucked it out the window. In my sage teenage wisdom, I thought I approved the ultimate point. But my dad had a different idea. He slammed the brakes, slowly bowed his head while gripping the steering wheel, and finally looked at me. All he said, like it was a polite request, was, "Make this right."
何が正しいんだかわ
I
かんないか
sat
ら
there
ね、
in
この世の
silence,
中は。
fuming, but I eventually got out and combed every square inch of the woods, muttering profanity after profanity. I found it 30 minutes later, near a small waterfall off the road. I went back to the truck, put the wet tape back in, and sure enough it worked. We didn't speak another word to each other the rest of the night.
Wow, I knew you were a crazy teenager, but...
It's hard to believe, isn't it? It surprises me too.
多分そうだな。
It's like I didn't really know who that kid was back then. I bet my dad thought the same thing over and over. It's almost like he was saying, make this right to himself, more than to me.
正しいことをしろっていうのはなかなか難しいよね。だって何が正しいかなんてその時によって大きく変わるからね。例えばその時がそれが正しかったとしても、同じような状況になった時に同じことをやってそれが正しいとは限らない。キツネうまく飛べないな。なんでこれを手に入れるの？これ。これさ、追加できるかな？ちょっと考えがある。ここは登れないかな？登れねえな。登れないんだったら一旦降りるっていう手もあるぞ。自分でジャンプボタンさえ押さなければいいはずだと思ってるので、これでジャンプしたらどうなるかってちょっとやってみたくない？いくぞ。いけた。 完璧じゃない？次は
My biggest hope for the players that are playing is that they realize how similar these two parallel stories are of this fox looking for her missing cubs
読めねえ。
and
なん
also
て読むんだこれ。
this
単語
son
が読めない。
connecting with his father. And so I try to add little touches in the voiceover and in the environment to help draw those parallels, even if they seem totally dissimilar. A big example is the truck, for instance, that Joseph grew up with. It's purple and yellow like the butterflies for this fox. So I tried to add as many touches like that throughout the story as possible.
パラレルって読むんだとしたら、あったかもしれなかったこと？どうかな？
You may have noticed there's a little pond here. And believe it or not, I tried everything I could to get swimming working in this game, and I just could not do it, unfortunately. And so all the water in this game you can just stand in, which is, it still like bums me out, but the systems were not working, it was buggy. So I just had to throw it out, which, you know, I think it's okay. Like, I wish it was there, but again, the focus of this game is on the story.
いやー、これほんと2時間ぐらいで終わるんかしら？説明。ここからジャンプしちゃいけないからね。一回でもジャンプボタン押したら終わりだよ。なかなか飛べるってことは分かったからな。むしろこんだけ集まったらもう飛ぶどころか普通に運んでくれるんじゃねえかと思うんだけど、ダメなのかな。
My friends would laugh about that night and talk about how crazy it was, and I laughed along, pretending it didn't bother me. But it did. I imagined my friends growing old in the bush, unable to find that thrill in those godforsaken ice fields. It's like those mountains were a literal wall keeping me from leaving, where all I would have to look forward to are lumber yards and evening beers. I had to climb over. That was my only goal for a long time.
Hey. こんなにさ、思い通りになることになるっていうぐらいになってるけど、大丈夫かなこの後。だってなんかのアイテムをゲットできるぞ。
If there was some way I could take my love of drawing and turn it into a way of escape, nothing would make me happier. I wanted to create instead of tearing trees down. I wanted to move to the lower 48, not because I hated it there in Alaska, but I hated the idea of it. It's like all of that spite inside me had created this monster which followed me around my whole teenage years. I put so much energy into doing what others didn't expect of me. Why did I do that?
There's one fact you're forgetting, though. If you didn't have that fire in you, we probably would have never met.
You're absolutely right. Maybe the destination is all that matters in the end. But then why am I awake? Why am I seeing this fox go on her journey? And why can't I stop thinking about my dad?
次の道しるべがわからん。実はこっちはなかった説？あそこ登った方がよかったかな。あ、次のシーンに行きそう。さっきはあれか。次の場所に早く行き過ぎたのか。だからさ、こぎ線ではどっちが正しい道？こっちはこっちで語りがあるな。オープンワールド。
I did want to do something a little different with this level. I wanted it to be more open world feel, and that there was something blocking your progress. So it did encourage people to look closely and see how to unlock this blocked way. And I do like just walking around this level and listening to the beautiful music by Josh Kramer. His work really sets the mood for the whole game.
誰か翻訳してください。全くわかりません。なんて？一応光の玉はあったけど、それだけだな。こうなってくると、変に迷ったりするぐらいだったら元の場所に戻るか。あっちにもあった。左右にそれぞれ3つずつあるのかな？でも先に進んだところで何もないってことでいいのかな？そしてトロフィー。この中よくわかんない光る玉を50個手に入れましたってことらしいです。って言われてもな。こんだけ進めてるのに何が何だかまだわからんってどういうことなんだろうね。この子は狐を探してるんだよね。自分の子供を。Music.
I don't think the first tree could work at all without the music by Josh Kramer. And his music, it's actually publicly available to license, and so it was affordable for me since this was a hobby project. And it's something I like to tell new indie developers all the time, like, you can't afford that composer, you can't afford a full-time programmer. You need to cut corners and finish your game, and the way to do that is to use these amazing publicly available assets that anyone can purchase and license. And so his music it's incredible, and I actually haven't talked to him that much, I've just emailed him. But his music was nominated for Most Emotional Music at the Emotional Game Awards in France, and he's just a really nice guy. And I think there's so much amazing content out there that if you're thinking of making a game, like, look around and see what you can make work on a tight budget, because it worked really well for the first tree.
Even at my most distant, at the times when I detested him the most, he kept reaching out. For a year straight, he asked me every week when we were going camping. I thought he was just dense. Eventually, to shut him up, I agreed. We carried out the worn lawn chairs from the garage and set up a cinder block campfire at the site we'd always used behind the house. We walked down the mountain path, talking in the warm sunshine we only got a couple months of the year. Those 3 obsidian rocks shimmered alongside the shore, almost like sparklers pressed against a dark window. I'll never forget that wet stone on my feet, or how those massive mountains looked even bigger in the lake's reflection. I felt small, but grateful. As the sun set, my dad found something I hadn't seen for a long time. The tree where I'd made my first carving when I was 6. I hadn't even carved it. My dad had helped me, but I still called it my tree. Something about seeing my name there made me open up, and we talked about everything that night in that old camouflage tent. I told him how much I loved sketching and design, and how it would be a dream to study architecture in Seattle. I told him how I didn't get along with my friends much anymore, but that I didn't mind being alone. He told me he was there for me, and he joked that if all he had to do was write my name on a tree to finally get me to talk, he would have left me carved logs with novels on them in front of my room every morning. I don't know why it took me that long to realize it, but it was then I knew how much he'd sacrificed for me. On our property, there were old abandoned pieces of a shed and car long left unused. I used to ask him all the time who those people were that left all this junk, and I'm sure he got so tired of hearing it that he made up some elaborate stories how a brown bear ate them and haunted the woods afterwards. What's funny is I think it made those people seem more real, growing up thinking they were still hanging out like they couldn't say goodbye. I used to tell my friends how I could swear I saw spirits move near the water, and that always freaked them out. I guess it didn't bother me, because the way I saw it, They were normal people with old cars and sheds, just trying to figure out how to survive and be happy in the middle of nowhere. It was a cool thought that they didn't want to leave, but you know, I was a weird kid.
Well, you had good company since those ghosts like living in a place where they were brutally devoured.
無残に食べられた場所に住みたがる幽霊ってどういうこと？ちゃんと聞いてなかったからな。困ったね。びっくりするぐらい何もない。この上登った方が良さげな感じがするんだよな。そのためには登るための手段がわからない。これだ。そして何かあるぞ。ストーリー
Almost all stories follow the same kind of structure, and it starts with an inciting event, and then there's rising action, and then there's a climax, and then there's falling action. And it's actually really difficult to make an interesting story where you only hear these two people talking, and it's spoken through a dream that's already happened. And the most of the action is about this animal that isn't directly related to this couple at all. So I don't know what I was thinking, but my hope was that it would create some interesting things and connections that I didn't see before. And that was kind of the whole exercise of making the first tree.
あ、危ねえ。もう二段チャームできなくてやべえと思ってたよ。あったー。謎の光岩。なんかしなきゃ掴めた。よし。たださ、若干音楽前まって少し眠くなるよね。さてもう一個どこだ？ここまで考えるにもう一個の分岐の道が怪しいな。その道の向こう側に何かがあると考えて行くことにするのだけれど、まず第一の問題として、この向こうだね。よし。森の中ってなんでこうも迷いするんだろうね。まあ、迷いやすいというよりかは人の資格の問題だよね。脳というか、同じ景色が続くからその分だけ情報を得ようとする力が減るんだよね。で結局同じ道をぐるぐる回ってるって思わせるっていうか、思い込むというか、ループしてるように見えて実はループしてないっていうのが真実ではあるんだけれど、ただ知らず知らずにさっき踏み入れた道のことを忘れてるから、同じ道を通って回って回って回って回ってぐるぐるぐるぐる回るっていうのはあり得る。大体迷いの森とかそういうので、平坦な道でも傾斜でも何でもいいけど、ぐるっと回るように作られてればそういう風になってしまうなんてどうでもいい知識です。いや、喋ることねえんだこれ。メイキングモッツ。
Earlier I said I just love going through video games and exploring, like looking at every nook and cranny and just trying to find little details. And I think that started because in middle school and high school, I would make mods for my favorite games, namely Jedi Knight, Jedi Outcast, and Far Cry. And I loved like this huge world of mod makers who would make these levels, and it'd be like the most random creative things, and I would just love exploring, usually multiplayer levels, by myself. So even though I went to college for film, before that, like before high school, I was making video games and mods, and it was my favorite thing in the world. I made a ton of different levels. I made an abandoned space hotel with a dance floor and cafeteria. I made a haunted campground with cabins and tents. I made this whole city with like the first ever day-night cycle with running showers and stuff in the hotel and the apartment buildings. And I just loved making those mods. And I think that carries over to my game, The First Tree, and also the one before that, Home is Where One Starts, which is it's exploration. You're just looking around and appreciating the details.
こう範囲は広く作ってあるんだけど、正直そこまで行く必要がないな。まあたまにこういうのあるからちゃんと見なきゃいけないんだけどさ。今日は昨日というか今日というか、まあなんとかね終わらせたいからっていう理由もあって執筆を続けてたわけなんですが、次は何の物語?
We were happiest underneath the evergreens. We decided it was time to finally map out the hundreds of acres we lived on, just to pass the time during the summer. He was only free in the evenings, so I would spend the day wasting time on dial-up internet and sketching, and then we would rush into the woods, pen and map in hand, before evening fell. Sometimes, the aurora borealis would cast a cold green glow on the mountainside, and we would finish our route underneath a twilight sky. Sometimes I was lonely during those summer days, but there was comfort in the routine.
A lot of teenagers aren't looking for the daily grind, though. There's nothing wrong with wanting to get out, to leave your childhood home. You wanted to progress, to make something of yourself.
Yeah, you're right. That house. I'm sure it's the same as how I left it. But then why does it feel so different?
I doubt you're the only adult to have looked back and asked that question.
なんとなく今ゴースト・オブ・ツシマを思い出したよね。もしかしてこれツシマの狐ではないのか。そんなわけないかって話だけど。お、光があった。のだがこの光はあるんだけれど、特になんもね。この音楽いいよね。眠くなるけど。睡眠導入に結構使えそうな感じの音楽。やっぱさ、何をしていいのか全然わかんないけど、このゲームやっぱあの方にやってほしいな。あったあった。The way forward 前へ進む多分これによってさっき塞がってたツタがなくなっているはずなんだと思うんですけれど、実は今ここで問題がよく発生しててね、帰り道がわかんねえ。帰り道どこ？とりあえずこれはこっちにいたわな。あれあれ。この子の子供を探すっていう目的はどこ行ったんだ？ 子供を探すってこと自体が違うのかな。なんでここにこれだけ入ってんだ。ないか。てかね、この今流れてる音楽だけを切り取るとね、東宝みたいでいいよね。めちゃくちゃいいよ。光が差してるだけか。なんかあるかなと思ったけど。さて、なんかあるな。あれはでも光が出てないってことはもう見たってことだよな。なんかマーキングですか。話を若干戻しまして、昨日というか今日というかね、執筆をしてたわけですが、その途中、いろいろとね、適当にアーカイブだなだって見てたんですよ。なんか掘り返さなきゃいけないのね。
My dad built a lot of stuff in his free time. If he wasn't watching fly fishing or reading Tom Clancy novels, he was carving something. He made tons of birdhouses. Not that he was into bird watching. I think he really missed working and adding on to the home. If he couldn't afford the time to build onto our own house, he would have to settle with watching birds move into their little homes. We kept an old mattress in the bed of that ugly yellow truck, so we would drive it deep into the woods and then watch the birds fly into their houses while the sun set. Usually it was accompanied by venison jerky or a cold Coke, but not a lot of talking, which is how we both liked it.
特になんもないな。ね、そうやっていろんな配信とアーカイブを見てたわけですけど、同じようなゲームでもね、やっぱりやる人によって全然違えなーっていうことだけは分かった。崩れてるね。教えのとある方がやってるユーロトラックシミュレーター2っていうのを別の方がやってまして、どうせワーキャー騒ぐだけだろうから BGM でちょうどいいかと思って見てたんですけど、ちょっとスピードは出てるけどまだ安全に走ってるなーっていう印象でしたね。少なくとも横転することはなかったから、やっぱり横転するのは普通じゃねえんだなってことに気づいたよね。いや、それは普通じゃねえんだけどさ、そんな当たり前なんだけど、やっぱあれ、動けない。
横転しないだと。
そう、横転しなかったの、その人も。最初の方見てなかったからわかんないけど、途中から見てる限りだと横転はしなかった。で、ちゃんとカーブの前でね、減速とかするんだよ。何かいる。あれに襲われたか。狼。
Dad is dead. And he's never coming back, Rachel. I can tell you these stories, but I can never reminisce with him again. He can never hold a grandchild that we'll probably never be able to have. I can never talk to him again, and I'll never be able to say I'm sorry. For everything.
Okami.
It was really important to me that the wolf in this story that takes the fox's cubs, that it wasn't explained at all. It's just this entity that's in the background. And of course, it's supposed to represent something bigger than a wolf or even the fox. It's supposed to represent like the specter of death. And it comes when you least expect it. There's no justification. He's just there, always watching.
狼どこ行った？もう下まで行ったの？早くない？狼どこ？狼どこ？あれ？狼は？ 狼がいねえ。幻だったのかな。幻覚見た？まあいいや。幻覚だったことにしよう。まあ、そのね、ユーロトラックシミュレーター2は横転することもなくね、まあ、若干ね、最初の方は柱に激突したりとかはしてたんですけど、信号無視とか。もう、3回、4回目ぐらいでだいぶ安定してましたね。しっかりだってちゃんと走るし、途中だってちゃんとガソリン入れたりとかしてたし。だからそういう風な考えたらね、やっぱあれ性格出るのかもしれないって思っちゃった。その後は何見てたっけかな。あれか。グラミーシミュレーターをまだまだちょっとアーカイブ見てなかったので、それを見たりとか、あとあれ、ホールガイズの、まあ、あれはコラボと言っていいのかよくわからないんだけど、なんかほぼほぼ、片方が大体いないっていう謎のコラボ配信だったけど、まああれはね、圧倒的なゲームセンスの差だろうなと思ったけどね。そうだ、閉店事件もやってみたんだよね、ちゃんと。途中流し見はしてたんだけど、まともに見てなくって。見たは見たけど、あれやね。めっちゃ強がってたね。ただね、まあ、その人の閉店事件はね、まあ、相方と違って、わかりやすいぐらいビビるんだよね。動きが。相方の方はどちらかというと、怖くてもなんていうかな、その渦中に飛び込もうとするんだけど、もう片方の昨日見てた人のやつは、遠くから見ようとするっていう。
I need to go to bed. I just can't talk about this anymore. Good night.
しかも破られてる。この子たちの話はもうたくさんだ。たくさんだって言われてもな、あと一匹見つけてねえんだよ。確かそれを見終わった後に、すげえ話を通すに戻すんだけど、まあ、とある、全部とあるって言ってる。うん。またとある方の配信を見てたんだけど、そっちはね、コメントは執筆中でしてなかったけど、あれバカゲーなのね、多分ね。なんか寿司を食べるっていうだけの謎のゲームをやってたね。何あれと思って見たけど。あまりにも謎だったね。おや？ああ、なるほど。
そろそろ寿司を食べないと死ぬぜ。
そう、それ。しかも死んだ時は死んだぜとかってうるせえとかって思った。
You can't go to sleep feeling like this. I'm sorry for everything, and I know you need space, but I'm here for you. You don't need to feel so lost.
レイチェル。
Joseph, have I ever told you what my mother was like?
Hello, my name is Elise Whaley, and I was the voice actress for Rachel. I'm also David's wife. So that was convenient for working together. I was actually the voice actress for his first game, Home is Where One Starts, and I guess that I did a good enough job that David wanted me back, so I did the voice acting for this one as well. David definitely coached me through it because I'm pretty inexperienced when it comes to that. Home is Where One Starts was my first time ever doing voice acting of any kind, and we watched a lot of trailers of movies we liked to get the voice right of female leads who were talking in the trailer and try to mimic that and bring that into the game. So that had the right kind of feel and the right kind of atmosphere for the voice. My character actually is the same character from Home is Where One Starts. If you've played that game, you probably connected that together. And this is her probably about 15 years later, maybe 20 years later, in this game. I was happy to revisit the character of Rachel. We kind of leave her in an ambiguous spot in Home is Where One Starts. It definitely ends on a hopeful note, but there's not a lot of details. And in this game, you see that she's able to move on through a lot of her issues that she had from her abusive home and be able to start her own family and start a new cycle without that abuse, which I think is really inspiring.
You know what it's like not to have a mom at home. And you know how hard that made my childhood. What helped me was watching the birds in the morning before the school bus came. I thought that my mother was one of those birds, and it made me want to be free like her. My mom taught me how to fold origami cranes while she was in the hospital. So I told myself I would fold one every day until I could fly myself. I think we both have always
知らずに支援してる人がいるように、クソゲーに支援する人もいるのだ。
ああ、なるほどね。まあやっぱね、いろんな人がいるからこそ作られるっていうのがゲームだからね。
But only once in a while. I was sure to check every day immediately after school, and it usually ended in disappointment. I would even steal money from my passed out dad just so I could buy these off-brand dog biscuits.
キャラクターの顔の怖さはどうにかならな
Even
かっ
when
た
she did stop by, she never went beyond the fence.
全員が共通してなんか犯罪者の顔しかしてないんだよな。ウォーキング。じゃあウォーキングか。
So it's always interesting working with your spouse because, especially on a creative project, because they want your feedback, but it's something that's also dear to their heart, and they're dear to your heart, and you definitely don't want to hurt their feelings. So I was a little nervous when David asked me, he had finally finished writing the script, and he asked me to go over it and see what I thought. And I had minored in English. I majored in art, but I minored in English, so I felt like I had a little bit of experience. But I was definitely like a little scared because you don't want to be too harsh, but you also want to be honest. And it was the biggest relief when I read the script, and I was like, oh, good. My husband's a good writer. I don't have to change that much about this, just a few like grammatical things. And that was just like the biggest relief for me because it can be a tricky balance working with your spouse and making sure that that honesty is there, but also that love and the support is there as well.
I think my dad was the opposite of your dad in almost every way, except he was in the military as well. He coped with alcohol of every kind. The trailer started falling apart, he got angry, and I withdrew. More and more I became the weird, quiet kid who made lots of origami birds and carried dog biscuits around. I think we were pretty similar when it came to being the weird kids. And that same sincerity in college was one of the reasons I was so drawn to you.
結局あの寿司ゲームはちょっとしか見てなかったけど、本当何だったんだろうな。
Life got worse and worse, and at one point, I really didn't think I could survive another day with my soul still intact. I had no real friends, let alone neighbors, since we lived in the middle of nowhere. I should have talked to my teacher, but I was scared what he would do if he found out. As I waited for the school bus one morning, I walked around until I found something in an abandoned shed. Something I can't put into words.
So we're talking about Home is Where One Starts a lot, so if you haven't played that game, maybe this doesn't make as much sense, or maybe this is a little plug that you should go play it. But in that game, it actually features one of my artworks. I work as an artist and paper cutting, actually. And David used one of my artworks as a graffitied stencil in Home is Where One Starts that's against the wall of this shack. And it actually shows up again in the first tree, just a fragment of it.
履歴がないだと。
The first tree, the title actually comes from one of my artworks that I made back in
つまりこれはあれか。
2015, I want to say. And I made this artwork
これ走りながら後ろでぐるぐるぐるぐる回してブレーキングするやつだ。
And it had a lot of meaning for me, and
めっ
David
ちゃしんどい
actually
だよ
helped
これ
me come up with
BMW
the
式のやつ。
title. And he,
BMW
yes,
じゃない
because I was
BMX
really
か。
struggling. I was like, I have no idea what to call
BMX 式だ
this.
からすげえ大変なんだこれ。
I always go to David for title ideas and to bounce ideas off of him, and that's like the only way I can ever come up with a title is by talking with him.
まずは
So
自
we
転
were
車整
talking
備
back
士なん
and
で
forth and
ね。
looking at this
大体の
artwork,
講座わかるよ。
and he said, well, what kind of like movies or shows were you watching while you're making the artwork? Because my work's pretty tedious, so sometimes I'll watch a show or do some Netflix binging while I'm creating it. And I was like, oh, I actually watched Tree of Life a ton. And then we're like, Tree of Life. And we started thinking more about that and then arrived at the first tree. So it started off as one of my artworks and then became a part of David's art, which I think is really cool that we were able to share that title.
I summoned courage I didn't know I had, and I broke into my dad's room and found the key to the shed where he had locked my bike. I'll never forget that feeling. The wind rushing by my ears as the sun rose over fields of wheat. I was flying for the first time. I biked as far as my legs could take me until I found a house that felt friendly, and that felt like home. Those strangers helped me in so many ways. And if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have found my foster family. And if it wasn't for my parents, I wouldn't have met you. You have strength, Joseph, and you're not as alone as you think.
It's all just so pointless. Just waiting for life to happen. It's like having the home I always wanted is cursed out of my reach. Thought of being a parent myself. How could I do that when I couldn't even be a good son? I'm sorry. I know what you're saying. I just don't know how things will work out. These quiet hours will turn into years. We'll wonder which roads passed us by.
Then we'll forge a new road together. Besides, I discovered for myself that one fateful morning where any hopeful road leads to. There may be thorns and mist, but it always leads to the same thing.
And what's that?
Family.
I'm so glad that you're part of my family, Rachel.
And I'm glad you're part of mine.
A question I get a lot is why a fox? And it ties into just how important family is for me. And Fox is actually a family name from my wife's side, from Elise. And she always heard about the legacy of the Fox family. And because of that, growing up, it was her favorite animal. She even made these 2 wooden foxes for our wedding cake toppers. So I thought it would be cool to have that animal in the game while these 2 people are having this conversation in the middle of the night.
なんていっぱい鹿がいる。餌だ餌だ。やられるわ。待って待って。ねえねえねえねえ。待って待って。ねえねえねえねえ。なんで君たちは逃げるんだい。何をすればいいんだ。
ヘラジカのフレンズだ。
君たちはどんな味をするんだい。栄養になってくれないのかい。この中から一頭ぐらいなくなっても大丈夫じゃない。ダメ。できるだけちっちゃいの狙うからさ。あまり大きいとね、それまで育つのは大変だからさ。あと生まれたての方が美味しいって聞くからさ。ダメ。やっぱキツネがここに来てるのに微動だにしないってすごいなこいつら。もうちょっと子供とか助けようとしろよ。矛盾。しかしなんもねえな。ここは無視していいのかな。 まあ、ちなみになんだかんだ言って執筆は、まあ、ある一定の完成を迎えたわけですが、その影響で完結してるのでだいぶ眠いっすよ。まあ、そこで3時間、4時間ぐらいしか寝てないのも悪いんだけどね。しかしこれは結局どういう物語だったんだ？未だにちょっとわかんないですね。これを見るにこの光の玉は全部で100個ぐらいあったんじゃねえかな。反射で全然見れるよ。あってもわからんが。多分最初のところのエリアチェンジしちゃったからな。多分全部集めたらトロフィーが手に入ったんじゃなかろうか。もう一個アーカイブ見た気がするんだけどな。何見たっけかな。まあそれよりもね、ずっと執筆をしてたからね、正直ほとんど覚えてないんだよね。ああ、あれだ。これもまたフォールガイズと同じだけど、同じ人たちのコラボのスーパーバニーマンだ。それ見てたわ。あれはなかなかだね。あれあんなにうまくいかないもんなのかなってちょっと見てるけど、多分うまくいかないんだろうなと思う。100個ぐらいどころか100個以上あるのか多分。100個どころじゃねえな。だってこれで99でしょ。あと1は98か。残り2個で終わる。またロード中。なるほどん。俺はまだ続くね。
The fox knew her last cub would be waiting for her at the first tree. She was almost there. The rain cascaded onto the jade valley where the entrance to the tree was. Life was protected there, because that's where life began. It was now only a mother and a daughter left. Items from my life still dotted the ground as she moved closer to her destination and destiny.
やっぱり始まりの木なんだ。なんで始まりの木なんだ？命が巡る始まりの木なんだ。シュールだな。やっぱ100でトロフィー手に入った。まあでしょうね。50があったらそれは100もあるやろって思ったけど。んで君本当にすごいね。丈夫じゃない？いくらなんでも。ちょっと丈夫すぎやしないかい？いくら猫でもきつくない？さっきいた狼どこ行ったんだろうね。まだ忘れてないからね、あれ。狼さんかー。この話はやめとこうね。行って ってどうにかなるわけでもないし。今日それでいろいろと用事を終わらせてきたわけですよ。まだ用事終わってないんだけどね。延期になっちゃったやつが19日だから。そう。ビジュアル
Usually what catches people's attention of the first tree is the visuals, of course. And I was inspired by a lot of people making these levels. The second level is inspired by just these beautiful autumn photos of a real forest. And this level, the Jade Valley, is inspired by the artwork of Heather Penn, who did the Overland games. I just love those greens with a lot of gray in it. I love the strong vignettes in the corners of the frame. And of course, this environment pack was made by the very talented Swedish designer Mikael Gustafsson. And of course, his initial designs inspired me, and I was able to build off of that. And I'm really grateful that he allowed his environment pack to be made publicly available.
At the end of high school, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. I looked into the best architecture schools on the West Coast, then got a dose of reality when looking at other students' portfolios and the high cost of tuition. I still wanted to be something, to be the next Alvaro Siza, and to make those thousands of sketches worth something in my grand history. But now even an internship sounds impossible. Siza helped me understand how essential emotion is in architecture, and he also said light is the real composer of space. I like to think these glints of light, like not finding a job, or even a strange dream about a fox, are something I should be thankful for, even if the illuminated space is something I'm less than comfortable with.
特になんも情けだな。音がなくなったよ。さっきまであった幻想的な音楽はどこへ？終わりが近いのか？さっきもなんか終わりそうな雰囲気があったけど終わんなかったよね。なんだろう。なんで急に音楽が消えた？これ名前なんだっけ？学校にあったな。名前忘れちゃったな。普通に学校にあったもんな。あったどころかその上に乗って遊んでたもんな。旅行に倒して玉転がしっていうかさ、みたいなことしたりとか、バランス取って、転がしたりするとめっちゃ怒られるっていうね。私はやってないけどね。やってたやつがいたなーっていう。あそこにも行って、その遠くまで行かなきゃいけないのか。今度は結構長い道のりだね。用事を終わらせて、ここ数日、執筆をしてたっていうのもあって、一食しか食べてないんですよ。なんでそろそろね、怒られそうだなと思ったので、今日はちゃんとお昼ご飯は食べました。で、お昼ご飯食べて、これは何が出るかな？
My dad was super supportive with my college plans. To a point. Things were okay until this terrible accident happened. I guess a forklift flipped over due to a bad axle, and it crushed one of the workers there. My dad didn't eat for days, even though he wasn't directly involved. It devastated him. Not only did it hurt the business, but it just freaked him out. He would talk in his sleep, muttering things about firing people and saying sorry. One fateful day he approached me, said that since my school search wasn't going well, I should finally be a man and take over the family business. He said one day he was going to die, and that all of his work, sacrifice, and even that man's life would be wasted in vain. I just lost it. Teenage me just exploded at the thought. Screwed up. I said things I shouldn't have. He was having a crisis, and I pretty much spit in his face.
By now you've probably caught on to some of the themes I love to explore in these stories. And the big one is of this tree, the first tree on Earth. And a lot of people have asked me, what does that mean? Why a tree? And basically it boils down to this delicate balance between nature and its relationship with life and death. And I love these stories where they put like these microscopic relationships, like something of like a father and a son, and juxtapose it next to this epic story of like the creation of the universe and the first tree on Earth, and how they can be equally as important, because in my mind, like, my family is as important as like the creation of the Earth. And it reminds me of like some of the stories I love, like The Road by Cormac McCarthy, or The Tree of Life by Terrence Malick. Basically, I wanted to make sure the player felt that there was a higher power than themselves, and that there was something watching over them as they went through this story.
Joseph の家だったりする？
ある友人が言ってたけど、固形物が入るうちが穴よ。
そうね。それは本当そうよ。噛めなくなる、飲み込めなくなるっていうのはなかなかだからね。お、星見っけ、星？光？これほんと全部で何個あったんだろう。オールコンプとかってあるんだろうな、多分。いやでもそれ探すの大変じゃね？それこそ地道に全部探さなきゃいけないな。てか BGM がなくなったのがマジで気になるんだけど。お、家だ。あそこ行っていいのかな？ローディング入らない？大丈夫？大丈夫かな？大丈夫そうだな。誰もいない。家具もない。むしろこの子人がいたら困るけどな。登れない。最初でも確かザ・ファーストツリーっていう、なんて言ったんだあれは。メッセージボックスなのかな？なんて言ったらいいんだろうあれは。があって、今さっきのザ・ファーストツリーっていうのがあった。多分この語り部の人にとっての意味が変わったのかな？あくまで憶測に過ぎないんだけどね。こういう考察がはかどりそうなゲームって面白いよね。こっちじゃなさげ。なぜ結局彼女の方なのかわからないけど、この狐を見ているのかっていうのと、それの行動に合わせてじゃないけど、過去のことを話しているのかとか、病院だな、これ。病院のベッドだ。こんな感じだと腕をやってるな。 さっきのトレーラーの下敷きになった人ってことか？待って、あれを掘り起こす前になんかあったな。別にあれを掘り起こしてんだよ、先に。掘り起こしての、光を取って、あ、まだ続くね。はい。
Was that the last time you talked to him?
あれおやりさんなの？
No, I called on holidays, and he would call on my birthday. I guess we acted like nothing ever happened, which was stupid. Didn't want to ask about his lumberyard. I'm sure he didn't want to ask about my job search. I never went back and visited. I think the last conversation we had was about what movies we had seen and what exactly a best boy is in the credits. I thought he would be here so much longer.
はい。何の話してまあ、そうそう。今日はね、たまたまいろいろな意味で時間が余ったので、久しぶりにね、アニメを見たんですよ。もうね、何ヶ月ぶりだろう、ちゃんとアニメ見たの。正直、最後にその前にアニメ見たのが、妹の家に行った時の、あれは兄兄弟だったっけかな。で、あれだよ。名前忘れちゃった。あれなんだっけ。やべ、タイトルが出てこない。そっちが最後なんだけどな。あれ自分の好きな作品なんだけどな。思い出せないや。年かな。まあいいや。まあ、それが最後で、そうでも何ヶ月前だろうね。だいぶ前だよ。ぐらいに見たのが最後だったんですけど、私 Amazon プライム入ってるくせにほぼ利用しないっていう謎にずっと課金し続ける人なので、すごいなんか、多分年単位で無駄にしてるんですよね。Amazon プライム会員を。で、まあ、たまたま気が向いたっていうのもあって、まあ、たまにはアニメでも見るか、と思いまして、今やってるアニメだけどね、エンゲージキスっていうのと、あと、歌われるものの二人の箱おろってやつを見た次第でございます。まあ、エンゲージキスに関しては、つなこ先生がキャラデタをやられてるということで、もともとね、見る前から絶対好きになる。いるけど、目の前になんかいる。そっか、最後の一匹も死んでたってことか。
In the distance, the first tree illuminated the wasteland. She couldn't go home anymore. She did the only thing she was capable of.
いや、画面が暗くなる。
Moving forward.
いや、こんな
My
感じで
dad
うなだ
died
れる。
alone in the middle of the wilderness. I should have been talking to him more. I should have done a lot of things differently.
ラストステップ。
If the first tree on earth brought life with it,
そっか、
if
これ
it
が
taught
最
the
初の
birds to sing and fly and showed saplings how to grow, what could it do for us?
結局子供たちは全部
Obviously, there's a really emotional part, but I'm gonna talk through it anyway. A lot of people correctly identify that Journey was like a huge inspiration for the first tree. And this part, it is like a callback to that part where you're climbing up the mountain with your friend you don't know, and it just gets snowier and snowier, and you just keep going, and then eventually you collapse. And that part, that made a huge impact on me. And I don't even own a PlayStation 3 or 4. I rented a PlayStation from like a rent-a-center right after completing Home is Where One Starts, just because I'd heard so much about it. And everyone was right. It was a very impactful game. And it definitely inspired the first tree.
プレイステーションってところと、ファー
There
スト
was a
3ってところ
letter
し
I
かわからなかった
received
な。
yesterday from a name I didn't recognize, with a quote I can't stop thinking about.
そうだね。死は生の
Death
反対では
is
ない
not
ね
the。opposite of life, but a part of it. More and more,
死は生きていく上での最終的な過程だからな。
each
結
of
果でもある。
us have our own journey to the first tree. But sometimes I'm not sure I'm ready to take that first step.
You already have my love.
つまりだ、すべては巡るってことでいいのかな。そういうことよね。この狐が母狐だっていうことは分かってるんだけど。結局間に合わなかったってことだよな。間に合う結果もあるのかな。そしてここまで来たはいいんだけど、何をしたらいいんでしょう。そもそも合ってるかどうかの方が動かなくなったよ。
いつの間にか絵文字、でかくなって、そして置いた。
だね、多分。あ、これ集めた光の数だけ文字が打てるんだ。最初の木は目を覚まし、子供たちに最後にもう一度だけ伝えたいメッセージがあるかを、狐に優しく尋ねる。狐はこう答える。これどうやって打つの？待って。文字が打てねえ。文字が打てねえ。あ、打てた、開けた。ああ、そっか。これ、罰だったっけね。
さっきまでの英語語り、何一つ理解してない我々に、一体どうしろと。
そうだよね。だからね、なんとなく思ったことしか書けないっていう。一言って言いながらさ、一言じゃないっていう。こんなもんかな？めっちゃ短いけど。まあいいや。まあこういうことだよな。これで。これ正解とかあるんか？そもそも。光ったよ。いなくなったけども。
I guess her journey was over. But I have no idea. was only a dream, a distraction from tomorrow.
I don't think dreams normally bring back to memory so many important feelings. Maybe it was just a dream, but it was also a gift.
Yeah, I suppose. But tomorrow we're getting on a plane to the last place on Earth I want to be. The only person that would have made the trip worth it is gone.
You're going to see him and be with him one last time before you say goodbye. I have one last quote for you by Emerson, sealed in an imaginary letter from me to you. It is the secret of the world that all things subsist and do not die, but only retire a little from sight and afterward return again. Go to sleep, my love. We have a big day tomorrow, but I'll be there with you every step of the way.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. Good night, Rachel.
てか何このよくわかんない夢落ち。またローディングしてる。まだなんかあんのかな。より長いな。あ、よかった。今なぜ3つしかないんだろうと思ったら4つ目あったね。6ヶ月も経ったよ。そこで半年って書かないのがなかなかだよね。どこ？ジョセフ視点？あ、動いた。え？死んでる。勝手に殺せんだって。こいつさ、外にいたら狐がいるとか汚ねえな。もうちょっと掃除しなさいよ。いや、掃除はしなくていいけどさ、もうちょっと整理整頓しなさいよ。I love AK。
暗い。
ね。電気つけたいんだけどな。I love AK って書かれるとさ、カラシニコフって言いたくなるよね。これはどっちの実だと、赤眼なのか、それともただ単になんかクリームが舞ったせいでああいう風に見えるのかがわからん。ただいまの議事国、
流れ玉が
なんか当たったらしい。つけられないしな。え？あ、そっか、これ丸だったっけな。ごめんごめん。ちょっとさ。
You're probably thinking, what is going on? And that was definitely my intention for this epilogue part of the first tree. This is my favorite part. This is the part I'm most proud of. And it definitely, like, it's supposed to evoke this, like, what is going on? Where am I? I was not expecting this. When I was marketing and blogging about making the game, I never showed anyone this part. I never told anyone. I never shared screenshots. I wanted it to be a complete surprise. And I also wanted it to feel a little creepy because it's totally inspired by those nights where you wake up in the middle of the night and you can just hear the sound of the wind outside the house and you can't sleep. So you walk around in this like twilight stupor. And I would say the whole first part of this game where you play as the fox, its whole purpose is to set up for this conclusion. So yeah, I would encourage you to look around and see how many things you recognize from the earlier part of the game.
引っ越してきたやつそんなだってない。いやでもな、ウサギだ。でも引っ越してきたばっかって感じだな。なんでここだけ開いてたん？いや、火の不始末ちょっと危ないよ。ちゃんと消してから寝なさい。そういうことしないの。火事になってから遅いんだよって走り始めた。開かない。これじゃないかな。あら？ なかなかのお車で、配色がとても、個性的で。引っ越し業者のトラックって普通ずっとここに残ってるもんだっけか。いや、まあいいか。なんかの夢って書いてあるけど。
I tried hard to foreshadow this epilogue, just because I wanted it to be a surprise, but I didn't want it to feel too out of place that it would be humorous. And so, Joseph, earlier in the game, he would say things like, I felt like I was right behind the fox the whole time. In my mind, the camera perspective acts as a metaphor for who the player is, what they're seeing. If the camera represents Joseph, or just like that video game trope of having the camera follow you. I guess the big question I wanted the player to ask themselves, is this a dream as well? And if so, does that even matter?
お前は一体何がしたいんだ。そしてどこに行きたいんだ。目的を言え。どこに行って何をしたいんだ君は。この上に登ればいいのか。いや、登れないぞ。君人間だよね。なかなかの今高さから落ちたよ。大丈夫？いけないな。うん。君なかなかの高さから落ちるけど大丈夫？あっちか。しかし、なんかジャンプのとか鈍いな。ここからジャンプできるかな。そんなすん降りれねえ。ジャンプ。お前すげえな。お？どこだどこだ？でも待って。あそこの光が気になるんだ、先に。ちょっと待ってて。多分そっちの先にいるんだろ？嘘やろ？いけないの？あの光何？いけないやん。何あの光。ちなみにキツネはこんな風に泣かない。なんだこのなんか袋となんかコーンが混じったようなやつ。こっちじゃないのかな。うん、違うな。もっとどっちかっていうと犬っぽいな形だぞ。大体。犬と狼の間ぐらいか。どこに向かえばいいのこれ。柵があってどうにもならんすけど。積んだ？ ヒントがなさすぎる。後ろだよな、音だけに。いけないよね。登れねえしな。人間なんて不器用なんだ。どこを目指せって言うんだ。ジャンプで越えられないしな。いや、ほんとど素人。ほんとど素人。情報がなさすぎる。ーっと本当に何しろっていうの？誰か教えて。本当にこれ何したらいいの？登れよー。登れ。いや、ほんとこれ何がしたいの？これ何の時間？ほんとこれ何の時間？右からになったしな。何なんだよー。ここに入れってことかい。ノーヒントすぎるやろ。
What the hell?
普通ネタよな、あれ。透明やけに見えたけど。
I purposefully fade out the crosshair in the middle of the screen because I wanted it to be a direct callback to the camera following the fox in the first 5 levels of the first tree. I wanted it to go for that gut reaction that this was very familiar yet totally in a different world.
あとなんかある。急に加速したね、君。あ、君が疲れたの？はい。始まりの木じゃね？これは
Thank you for making it to the end of my game. And I hope you enjoy the personalized message that is featured on the trunk of this tree. It's a message submitted by another player that's retrieved from a database, and it's retrieved at random. And I did this because I wanted people, even if they feel alone through trials of death, that there is a community, an invisible community supporting each other. So thanks for playing.
ディスティネーションザット。最後の読みまして。夢の中だったはずなのが夢じゃなかったってことかな。浮かんだ？なんかよくわからんけど浮かんだ。浮かんだのかこれ。はい。というわけでこれはエンディングかな？うん、この感じだと。なんだろうね。感覚的には、まず子供が襲われた狐を夢に見ながら、己の半生を語る？結婚までの。っていうことでいいのかな？可能であれば英語を使用してください。ごめんなさい、できないです。できないです。なんでごめんなさい、家で。そういうことでいいのかなって思ってるんですけど、まあ終わったね。なんか新しいのが追加されたりする？続けるって何だったんだろう？途中で終わった場合かな？オートセーブでもあったのかな？はい。というわけで、終わりましたね。まあ確かにだいたい2時間ぐらいですね。あれかな？まあ結婚相手に対して今までの半生を語るっていう感じなのかな？だけだとなんか、あれだからって言い方もなんかめたいけど、この狐。
パチパチパチパチパチパチパチパチパチパチ。
うんってなるんだけど、私も。なんかね、この狐の物語と合わせてなのかな？なんか、なんだろうね。多分ね、これね、英語力があったらまだわかると思う。絶望的なまでにね、何言ってるかわかんねえんだ、これが。字幕ないと。だから多分そういうところが読み解けてようやくなのかなと。確かこれね、2019年だか18年だかの作品なんですよ。なので、まあ日本語版が追加されることはないんだろうけど、できれば欲しいなーってとこですね。まあ、こんな感じのゲームでございました。いつかね、これを狼さんがやってくれたらいいなって思いながら、ただ、狐にとっての出来が狼さんだったからどうなんだろうなって思うところも一緒だったけど。でもこれ、なんか光とか全然気にしないでいけばもっと早く終わりそうですね。ただただ目指せばいいだけなので。 進みながら物語が進行していくって感じかな。で、要所要所思い出の品を掘り起こして、この思い出に浸る。ってことは多分あれだね。荷造りしてるね、多分この時に。荷造りしつつ、そこで出てきたものに対して思い出を語るみたいなことをしてるんじゃないかな。って思いました。今、唐突に。というわけでね、暇つぶしのゲームになるんじゃないかなと思いますけれど。ザ・ファースト3っていうのをやらせていただきました。最後まで謎がたっぷりでしたね。また次の配信はね、いつも通りの配信をしようかなと思いますので、一応アンケートにもありましたので、次はアライズをやろうかなと思います。ブラッドボーンも進めたいけど、アライズも進めたいからね。それがいつになるかはちょっとお楽しみにということで、スケジュール的な問題もあるので、できたらやります。はい。ではご視聴ありがとうございました。お相手はりょうきれいでした。ではまたねー。